Hello, and welcome to Pro Tips for Building a Foundation for a Secure SDLC. Today's webinar is sponsored by Harness and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great session, we do have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of it. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a couple of resources there from Harness. There's a link to learn more about Harness's comprehensive built-in security testing orchestration. And we have a PDF which gives you a definitive guide to secure software delivery. So check both of those resources out at any time during the presentation. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section as well. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask your questions of our expert presenters. So to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, the ATM team will look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get into our session. So now I'd like to introduce our presenters. We've got a pair of top product marketing leaders from Harness, Sean Roth and Chinmay Gaikwad. So let me bring them into the scene. Sean and Chinmay, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much, Scott.
Well, I'm really looking forward to this, so I'll turn things over to you to take it away.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. We've got an action-packed webinar and presentation, including a demo for you. My name is Sean Roth, and I've been with Harness. It's almost about a year and a half. I'm responsible for go-to-market around our security products here, and I've worked in enterprise IT across different segments throughout my whole career. This by far, developer security and the whole, modern DevOps world is by far the most exciting and the space that's evolved, I would say, the quickest. And a lot of what we're going to touch on today sort of looks at security from both the lens of the CISO and the security organization in the enterprise, but also from the DevOps and developer perspectives, which we'll share with you. So over to you, Chinmay, for your introduction.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Hey, everyone. My name is Chinmay. I have been with Harness over the last 9 months, and my areas of expertise are DevOps and AppSec. Definitely passionate about those two. So this is definitely an interesting and an exciting topic for me. And I was a developer before, so I've gone through the software development lifecycle, and I've also gone through all the security challenges. So definitely looking forward to this particular session.
All right. So at a high level here, I guess a bit of a typo, but these are all, number one in terms of, what takeaways can you expect from our sessions? So what Chinmay and I really wanted to do is to provide a pretty comprehensive overview of the software development lifecycle, looking at all of the security and compliance aspects that you would have to consider, but from the different areas and different stakeholders involved in DevSecOps and maintaining a secure SDLC. And so, we'll take a closer look at the approaches that DevOps and security teams need to adopt in order to align security for the software supply chain. And then finally, we'll get deeper into the tools, technologies, and processes that you would need for continuous supply chain governance, risk management, and compliance. All right, let's get started. So a little bit of context. These stats have made their way around it's apparent that the velocity at which modern applications are being built and deployed, there's a tremendous amount of open source libraries and dependencies that are used to build these applications. And so, today as it stands, over 80% of code bases have vulnerabilities because of these open source components. So, that's somewhat alarming, but again, a basis for a lot of what we're going to cover here. And then more broadly, the software supply chain itself is vulnerable in a variety of ways, and it's estimated by Gartner that over 45% of organizations will have experienced some kind of compromise of their software supply chain by 2025. So security, obviously a huge priority, but really imperative for the software development lifecycle. Let's have a look at the software supply chain. So we're going to start our presentation with this and just having a closer look at the elements of what makes up a modern software supply chain. I think this is particularly valuable for security practitioners and security and compliance leaders, just to get a better understanding of what makes today's software supply chain so difficult to secure and to align with regulatory compliance. So by definition, the software supply chain is really the sum total of all of the code, the people, systems, and processes involved in the development and delivery of software. So this is obviously both inside your organization, but outside, given how complex and distributed the process of building a modern application today is. So from a security standpoint, this is hugely challenging. And a deeper look, you can see here, our view of the software supply chain is really two main branches here. There's the application branch. So if you focus on your code and all of its dependencies and how it's packaged up and deployed, that's one area. The second area is really the CI/CD toolchain. So your integrated development environments, your code repos, CI/CD pipelines, etc. These are all the elements of the toolchain here. And of course, at the beginning, you've got developers and their involvement throughout the software supply chain at these different stages of the SDLC, and then finally your end customer. So again, there is a lot going on here. And as I mentioned before, software supply chain attacks are now frequent. So, the sensibility on the part of an attacker is that, there are so many aspects of each of these elements that are vulnerable. And, how can you possibly cover all of the ground to ensure, security for everything that you see within this picture? That is not a trivial problem to solve. And a lot of what we're going to present to you from the security and compliance angle really involves approaching this at a very detailed level, but also holistically. So what are the kinds of attacks that we've seen recently that map to each of these branches of the software supply chain? So on the application side, as I mentioned, given the number of vulnerabilities that are introduced into a code base through open source dependencies, one very high profile attack was Log4j. And so, they're compromising a piece of open source software that's used by tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of organizations and applications. That's a way to really force multiply the impact of a hack. And similarly, compromising a piece of the CI/CD toolchain can also lead to disastrous consequences. So SolarWinds and CodeCov, both of those hacks in the last several years, produced those kinds of impact. So again, the attacks are increasing in number and in sophistication. and therefore the tools, technologies, and the processes involved in securing each of these elements of the supply chain have to as well. There are a variety of risks. So, looking more closely at, what are the types of things that you need to protect against when it comes to open source software, the dependencies that you use to build your code. Here's a list of the top 10 open source software risks from OWASP. So, clearly there are known vulnerabilities, CVEs that you need to be able to detect and remediate. Packages could be compromised, techniques involved in, changing names slightly, to cause confusion. There are a variety here that I think there's, at least in terms of the customers and other people I speak to throughout the industry, there's an awareness of what all of these are, but just sort of getting to the point where that you've protected against these. That's really the hard part when it comes to security, for open source dependencies as well as for the tool chain. So again, here OWASP has another top 10, in this framework, security risks that you have to mitigate within your CI/CD tool chain. Poison pipeline execution is one. That's also an example that that Chinmay highlights in his segment here. The flow control mechanisms that you have put in place. What we're going to talk a lot about. On the identity and access management side, how important it is to have granular RBAC, a means of really only limiting access to systems based on roles and a variety of other criteria that make it much more difficult to do anything that you're not allowed to do. So governance is a huge piece of that as well. But these two frameworks are really important in the industry. There's obviously a lot of awareness, but how do you get to a point where that you're satisfying the criteria, throughout your supply chain, that you're adequately protected against these risks? What we know about SolarWinds is that it targeted the build system, and so there was a misconfiguration within the CI/CD tooling that was exploited. And likely the attackers used some kind of command injection to do this, replacing legitimate source code with some kind of backdoor. And as you would expect with a routine update, SolarWinds had updated their software, pushed it to customers, and then, of course, that backdoor was contained within that update. And so, again, like this is a very high profile and quite a devastating type of hack, where tens of thousands of users of the software had information that was potentially exposed because of this backdoor. And so again, this really underscores how important it is to be able to really tighten up security around the individual elements within the CI/CD tool chain. In fact, it's believed that this hack was done in a way that, some, obviously the misconfigured tooling was exploited, but the code was introduced in a way that, the attackers were able to hide their, there was no real trace of it. And so, again, that speaks to the level of sophistication of these types of attacks today, and how much more sophisticated and effective security has to be around it. So the goal here really, as I mentioned, with these, with the two OWASP, risk frameworks, and there are several other. There's CIS, there's NIST. The whole focus of achieving continuous supply chain governance, risk management, and compliance is critical for the supply chain. And so, as you're working in a kind of a security focus and compliance focus, you want to be able to establish governance of your software supply chain. So that means, when you look at the application branch of it, as we showed a few slides back, the open source dependencies that your software development teams are using, the way to govern the usage of those is through the software bill of materials. And so having SBOMs for all of these types of dependencies will allow you to, number one, kind of know what is in that software, what version is it, and a whole variety of other criteria, so that you can create policies that you can enforce throughout the pipeline that will either allow or deny the use of particular dependencies. So that, again, like that is a critical capability here. You also want to govern the promotion of software artifacts with Salsa. So if you're familiar with Salsa, kind of a really nifty and memorable way, to kind of an acronym for supply chain levels for software artifacts. And again, this is basically a framework established to evaluate trust in a particular software artifact. Where it was built. Was it built on, was the build infrastructure properly isolated? Is this a way for me to guarantee to my users that the software that I'm delivering to them is tamper-free effectively? That's what the Salsa framework is all about. And then having a full artifact chain of custody. That means at every step of the way how that artifact was built and all of the steps and processes that it's gone through. So you've got this immutable record for that. So again, those are the critical capabilities required for you to achieve governance over open source software, artifact promotion, and to really make sure that your software is tamper-free. Next, looking at the CI/CD toolchain, it's critical to identify where your risks exist. Are there any misconfigured tools? Do you have identity and access management in place that is effective and really does not give additional privileges or unnecessarily privileges to all of the stakeholders that are using those tools? So how do I bring my entire tool chain in line with some of the industry standard risk frameworks, two of the ones that we showed a few slides back? So that's really the question. How do we get there? And then finally, are you in a position, like, let's say, for example, you've implemented shift left security and you've found all of the CVEs that you possibly could by testing your application at different stages. But are you in a position to remediate vulnerabilities like a zero-day vulnerability, or perhaps it's something maybe a little less severe, like a component licensing issue? Can you go back? Do you know where those dependencies live, and can you effectively remediate them, either blocking the use of vulnerable dependencies or going and removing them, and then of course replacing them with known good versions? So that's really at a higher level from the security perspective, all about looking at the whole software supply chain and figuring out, like, based on all of those elements, how would you go about governance, complying with some of the industry standard risk frameworks, and then just being in a position to properly and effectively remediate vulnerabilities that you may find in the wild. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chinmay. So he's going to kind of continue along, but kind of going into a much more detailed look at the software development lifecycle, and take some of the concepts that I introduced in my section and develop them further with the sort of more specific, how do we achieve this at each stage? So
Thanks,
over to you,
Sean.
Jim. Yeah.
So yeah, Sean covered some really good points around security posture and what are the security best practices. Now let's look at how they can be applicable throughout the SDLC. For the sake of this particular webinar, let's keep it very simple. I know pipelines can get really complicated. But for the sake of the webinar, let's just focus on a very simplistic pipeline, which starts with the IDE, where developers write code. Then you have code repos, where developers commit code, raise PR, the code gets built out, then you create an artifact, and then you deploy the artifact. So very simple pipeline, and let's look at how we can actually secure this pipeline. So what we have seen our customers do and what we also recommend is starting off with securing each stage of the software delivery lifecycle. So secure IDE, secure code repos, secure the build stage, secure the artifact registry, as well as the deploy stage. Once you have done that, depending on the configuration of your particular pipeline, you can actually secure multiple stages together. So in this example, what we have shown is you can secure IDE, code repos, and the build stage together. But for your organization, it might be a different use case. You might want to try out different permutations and combinations, and that really helps secure a group of stages together. And then finally, obviously, securing the entire SDLC is also a critical thing. So making sure that you have all the common elements across all the different life cycles or all the different stages aggregated into the platform to make sure that you're securing the entire SDLC. Okay, so let's get into how we can secure each stage of the SDLC. For IDE, we recommend using a pre-configured cloud development environment. A cloud development environment is basically something that runs in a controlled environment. So VS Code, for example, can be run in a cloud, which is controlled by your organization, so that you don't have unauthorized access to it. And also your data is more secure than developers writing code on their own machines. It also helps whenever you onboard new contractors, so you can give them specific access to the cloud development environment as compared to the regular employees you have. So cloud development environments is highly recommended as it gives you the flexibility to manage your code in a more efficient way. And as we all know, code is a core IP, so definitely securing that is a priority. And then obviously implementing proper RBAC is essential. So RBAC gives access to different types of people based on what they are required to get access to. So as you'll see that the RBAC theme would be consistent throughout all stages. So we'll probably abstract that into the platform stage, but we'll take a look at that later. The next one is code repos. For code repos, using branch protection and approvals is again critical. You do not want any malicious code to get into your code repo or even beyond code repo. Code repo is the foundation for kicking off your builds and then artifacts and deploy stage. So making sure that you have proper branch protection and approvals so that unauthorized code doesn't get into the main line is critical. Definitely use secret scanners and SAS scanners and also open source dependency scanners in this stage, and use pre-commit or pre-receive hooks. We have seen a lot of organizations use secret scanners, for example, in this stage, but they don't use it on a pre-commit or a pre-receive hook. In that case, the secret actually stays in the Git history and it can still be exploited. So that is definitely a good tip to have whenever you're integrating a secret scanner. And then again, you can see the common theme, which is RBAC, giving the right people access to the code repo, giving the right people access to particular branches is extremely important here. Sean touched a bit about the poison pipeline execution. So poison pipeline execution is something which gives the attacker the ability to access your SCM, the source control system, and then deploy malicious code in your pipelines without even having access to the build side of the things. So if you follow these steps, the top OWASP concern, which is poison pipeline execution, can be avoided. On the build side of things, again, having a bunch of different SAS and SCA scanners is important. During my career in AppSec, I've seen that having only one scanner doesn't really solve the purpose. Each scanner has its own strengths and its own weaknesses. So having a group of scanners which run in parallel with each other is extremely important in this case. The other thing that we've also seen is whenever you run a build with your CI vendor, the connection throughout should be in a secure tunnel. This is because you're giving access to your code to the CI vendor, and essentially the secure tunnel enables the code to be secure, so your IP is secure. Sean touched a bit on the SALSA compliance for builds. We recommend having SALSA L3, which is the highest level of compliance according to the new version, so that your builds are secure. And then again, you can also use golden templates. Golden templates are essentially well-defined paths by your security team and the DevOps team, which the developers use. So it basically gives them a secure guardrail to develop their code. One pro tip here is use scanners that are not slow. Developers hate on waiting for builds. So definitely scanners taking hours is not recommended. It should be within minutes. Dependency chain abuse is one of the vulnerabilities that you can avoid because of all these steps. And dependency chain abuse is basically whenever a build is triggered, and the build system actually pulls in an open source package and runs it. And if the open source package is malicious because of typo squatting or some other reason, then it actually you're actually creating a malicious build and an artifact which hopefully would not get into production but can get into production. On the artifact side, we recommend using security scanners, container scanners. So there are a lot of good examples out there, Wiz, Aqua. So definitely leverage them. Sean mentioned that SBOM is critical for security. So definitely generating SBOMs at this stage is also extremely important. And then having audit trails is also critical because audit trails essentially track down how an artifact was created. And you can actually, if you have a good audit trail, you can actually figure out where the artifact was created or what code was responsible for the artifact, and then how it traveled throughout the journey of the pipeline. Again, giving proper access to artifact registries is also important. And then finally, on the deploy side, similar to running SAST and SCA tools on the build side of things, you can pair that with DAST tools on the deploy side of things. You can also use approval gates. Approval gates are essentially integration with approval systems such as ServiceNow or Jira, so that you make sure that the deployed artifact goes through proper approvals from different stakeholders, and only then it is deployed into production. Again, using templates on this deployment side of things also makes the life of a developer or a DevOps engineer very easy. So you have, again, secure guardrails, and you only deploy within those guardrails. And again, RBAC is, again, important on the development side of things as well. Earlier, I mentioned that depending on your organization's configuration, you can secure a group of stages together. So in this case, we'll take an example of how you can secure IDE, code repos, and the build stage together. This basically helps handle insufficient flow control mechanisms vulnerability, which OWASP has also lifted as a critical one, and also improper artifact integrity validation. So Sean mentioned SALSA. It's a nice acronym to have to remember. These are the 3 different levels of SALSA. So L3 is the highest level right now. And we definitely recommend having L3 level of SALSA compliance throughout your pipeline stages, so that you make sure that the artifact is not tampered with during the previous stages. All right. And then finally, jumping into the securing the entire SDLC side of things. As you saw, there are a lot of common things throughout different stages of SDLC. So you can actually make sure that they are a part of the platform and not just at a particular stage. So RBAC, for example, would help you mitigate this particular vulnerability, which is the identity and access management vulnerability. So let's see what are the common themes that we've seen throughout the stages. The first one is using policy as code to enforce policies. You can use different policy engines to make sure that developers don't skip the secure guardrails that you have set throughout your organization. So for example, integrating with security scanners before deploying or even before building the software can be a policy, and it makes it hard for the developers to actually circumnavigate that and build out the code without having a proper security process. Again, giving RBAC, having a granular RBAC is extremely important because depending on the stage of the SDLC, the permission changes. So you need to make sure that you give the right permissions and the right level of access to the particular stakeholder at each stage. And then finally, as I mentioned, audit trails are extremely important. So just keeping a log of how things were developed, how things were built, how artifact was generated is extremely important, and it's also important for compliance reasons. Okay, so talking about policy as code, one of the things that Sean and I are really big fans of is the OPA. OPA is Open Policy Agent. It's an open source project, and you can definitely integrate OPA into your organization. It's very easy to set up policies. It's done in a declarative fashion, and you can see an example here. The required step is Wiz during deployment. So basically what this tells us is none of the deployments can go through without having a Wiz scanner in it. So it's extremely important and it's extremely powerful. I definitely recommend trying out OPA. All right, so we talked about a lot of things. We covered a lot of things. So let's summarize everything together. So start from coding securely. So branch protection and approvals using SaaS scanners, using pre-configured cloud development environments are all great things to have. Secure your build pipelines using templates, using Salsa compliance frameworks, and then generating SBOMs and having security scanners for your artifacts is extremely important. And then again, using DAST and approval gates are extremely important for deployments as well. And then finally, you can combine all the key elements of each stage together in your platform that you're building for SDLC. So OPA, RBAC, and audit trails would be great to have during in your platform as a key feature. All right, none of the webinars today are complete without talking about AI. So let's get into it. The three common use cases of AI we have seen throughout are listed here. So the first one is deduping. So basically, as I mentioned, each scanner has its own pros and its own cons. So having multiple scanners definitely help you secure your code. But then there are also, it also comes with the added weightage of having duplicates in your scanners. So deduping is something that AI can do really well. So it can go through all the vulnerabilities and find out which ones of them are actually duplicates, and it can combine them so that your developers don't have to go through the duplicates. Providing code snippet to fix a vulnerability is also something that AI is really good at. So if it finds a vulnerability, if a scanner finds a vulnerability, AI can actually look at it, look at a few lines of the code, and then figure out how it can be fixed. And then in that way, developers who are not extremely or don't have a security background can easily fix those issues. And then if AI can't come up with a code snippet, it can also give you remediation steps. So AI is really good at that. So it can actually tell you that, hey, you need to bump a version of the open source package or something like that. When AI comes into picture, there is also a concern of how is AI being deployed. So basically, how is the LLM being deployed? And right now, we have seen a lot of organizations just because of the concerns around LLM, data privacy, and data security, not use LLMs at all. And they are still trying to figure out what the right strategy is. We've also seen some organizations, although not many, use LLMs that are hosted by OpenAI, for example, or Llama directly. So basically, you interact with the LLMs as anybody else would interact with the LLMs. But these obviously raise some security and privacy concerns. And the most common model that we have seen is having your own instance of an LLM in your own secure cloud or in your own data center. In that way, all the applications that need access to LLMs are secure, as well as the model is also secure. So with that, I would like to show a quick demo of how we do security at Harness throughout our SDLC process. So let me quickly share my screen. And Sean, if you can confirm that you can see my screen, that would be great. Let's see. Is it coming through?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, so this is what a pipeline looks like in Harness. So at Harness, we have a very visual looking pipeline so that it's easy to understand what stages exist in your SDLC. We also have a YAML representation of the same pipeline. So people comfortable with YAML can use YAML. People not comfortable with YAML can use the visual stuff. In the build stage, you can see we have integrated a lot of security scanners. So Black Duck and Sneak, an example here for SCA, Sneak and SonarQube for SAST, and then JFrog and Aqua for image scanning. So these are some of the steps that I mentioned in my presentation before, so you can definitely integrate these scanners. Let's look at the security view of this. So what we have done is we have aggregated all the data from different scanners into this unified view. You can see the number of critical, high, medium, and low vulnerabilities. And then you can also see that one vulnerability was added during the previous build. So this is important because you can actually figure out which build is responsible for which vulnerability.
Yeah, one of the things that, I'll just add, Chimay, real quick, that with the Harness platform, a key tenet really is developer experience and productivity. And so we've built a lot of common dashboards and workflows for both developers and security practitioners. And the way to, that we've seen, the way to resolve security issues is really to have, to provide that level of coordination. And so, when you can all look at the same thing and perhaps there's a security exemption that you have to work through, maybe a critical vulnerability shows up, but it's really a false positive or not anything that will impact the application, then it can be easily managed as opposed to, throwing it back and forth over the wall. So a lot of those types of processes and workflows are built into the platform here.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's definitely very developer friendly, and we've made sure that we provide a lot of steps so that developers actually remediate the vulnerabilities rather than ignoring them. So one of the examples that I wanted to highlight here was this particular one where Aqua found out a vulnerability, and then this is the actual step from the scanner. So the scanner did not actually mention any remediation steps here. So what we do is we integrate our own AI into this particular thing, and then we give you steps that can be used to remediate this. So our AI in this case is extremely powerful, and developers can go through these steps and actually resolve this vulnerability. There are also some examples where remediation steps are provided, so we actually show them. So for example, in this case, you can just upgrade the library to a more secure one, and that basically helps solve this particular issue. On the SBOM side of things, we also help you easily generate SBOMs, and then we also make the security team's life a bit easier by showing the SBOM score. There are different factors that go into the score, so definitely do check this out. But we make sure that you have a good understanding of what the SBOM looks like. You can also download the SALSA provenance from here, which is extremely important for the compliance side of things.
And we talked about the use of SBOMs for governing open source dependencies. And one of the the key factors in all this is to not only to be able to generate an SBOM, but to store it in a searchable format. And that ultimately is what's required if you're going to go back and figure out, okay, where does this dependency exist? Where can I find it? And how do I, again, preventative measures are critically important, but if you do have to go back and remediate impacted components due to a zero-day vulnerability, having all your SBOMs stored and available to search through is key.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean. The other thing that we do is we also provide you an overview of your security posture. So for example, this particular view comes with our supply chain security product, which essentially tells you how many repositories you have and how many active vulnerabilities you have. And then it breaks it down by critical, high, medium, low. So this is extremely important when you evaluate your organization security posture. We do the same for artifacts as well. So in artifacts case, we show which ones exist, how many vulnerabilities exist in a particular artifact. Again, extremely important and gives you a holistic view. I did mention OPA, so I'll quickly show an example of OPA here. So in this case, this is a deployment stage. And what we have done here is we have made sure that a ServiceNow approval step as well as an Aqua security scan is mandated for this particular step. In that way, your deployments have to go through these steps. Otherwise, they won't be put into production. So extrememely powerful, easy to write. So definitely recommend that. And Sean, I think that's the demo from my side. Do you want to cover the takeaways?
Yeah, thank you. No, that was great. So just real quick, I know we covered a lot of ground and also from, two different vantage points, but, some of the key takeaways on delivering software that's secure, and obviously that is the result of being able to secure all of the aspects of your software development lifecycle. So first off, have a very thorough look at your software supply chain when you're applying security. So, we talked about the elements of the supply chain, and then, Chinmay also dove into those elements, but, some of the actual practices around securing your repos and CI/CD tooling, and there's obviously a lot that goes into that. But you have to, as Chinmay showed, you have to treat each of those elements individually, but also apply security practices holistically. So consider all of that. We didn't talk a huge amount about AppSec and shift left security practices, but as Chinmay showed in the demo, the ability to integrate security scanners at the different phases of your software development lifecycle is critical. But the key here, again, if you consider the developer productivity, if you factor that into the picture, you want to shift security information left and not the actual workload. So to take care of the workload, you would apply AI. You would ultimately want to hand developers actionable guidance for remediating vulnerabilities, or use AI to generate code fixes automatically. All of that is a huge assist for developers who, as just need to spend all of their time and energy on building innovative applications and not sifting through list of vulnerabilities, trying to figure out which ones to work on. Thirdly, you have to be able to show that your software is tamper free, and so using the SALSA framework is critical to verify and ensure trust in the software artifacts that you use. So it's important that your build infrastructure adheres to the highest to the requirements of the highest level of SALSA, which is SALSA level 3, but use that as a basis for governance throughout your pipelines as well. The fourth item here, and we talked a lot about this, and we showed it in our demo, having a software bill of materials for all of your software artifacts, really key, essential to being able to essentially to be in a position to remediate zero-day vulnerabilities and other issues. And very closely related to that, item number 5 is to use a policy as code approach to governing pipelines. We talked about OPA. That's sort of the industry standard at this point. It's very widely applicable, and you can customize policies for your specific security and compliance standards. So again, I think this is an essential part of your toolkit. And that covers our presentation. Hopefully you found it informative, and if you happen to be on the DevOps or software development side of the house, you've gotten some additional perspective, from the security and compliance vantage point, and vice versa. So obviously, it's a huge problem to solve, but it takes a variety of different stakeholders working together with the right tools, processes, and overall approach. So thank you so much for attending. If you've got questions, Chinmay and I are very happy to answer those.
Yeah, super. Great presentation. And we do have a couple of questions that have come in here. One of them, they're saying, I like that the common things across all stages should be part of the platform. Have you seen any other patterns that can be integrated as a part of the platform to make it more secure?
Oh, yeah, I can take that one, and Sean, feel free to add more. The other pattern that I've seen is, I think I mentioned this in my presentation, it's templates. We have seen templatization as a part of the platform, and it can be used across different stages. So for example, creating a template for like a golden pipeline would be a great example, where you make sure that you apply a policy on that template where security scanners are a required step, and that can be applicable throughout the entire SDLC, right from code repos to build stage to artifact stage to the deploy stage. So I would definitely go with templates as a part of the platform.
Okay. All right, super. Another question here, wondering how important is threat modeling and its integration that helps to improve speed and security?
Yeah, I can take this one, and Sean, feel free to add from a security perspective. Threat modeling is definitely extremely important. During my previous life in an AppSec in the AppSec industry, we talked a lot about threat modeling and also secure by design. And I feel a lot of companies these days are actually pivoting towards secure by design. So I think there is a pledge by the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Association around secure by design, which basically gives a list of things that you should be following so that you make sure your software is secure by design. So it definitely is a fundamental model to follow. And I think once you have secure by design or threat modeling, it helps to set up secure guardrails. And once you have secure guardrails set up, you can definitely improve speed. So that helps you achieve both speed and security.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Another question here, any data on how accurate AI recommendations have been?
Wow, that's it would be interesting if any were out there and available. I would imagine, yeah, it's in terms of finding and resolving CVE, so known vulnerabilities. Yeah, I think that would absolutely shave off significant time for developers. In terms of efficacy, as Chinmay mentioned, AI has been proven to be quite effective at processing and understanding context around different code snippets. I have not really seen any quantitative results around that in terms of either what is the mean time to resolving or to remediating a vulnerability, or in terms of efficacy. But I think it'd be pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think it depends on the data that AI is being trained on. So it's very organization specific, I feel. So that's why we mentioned that using a particular scanner as well as deploying your own personal LLM would be very effective in this case, so that you get more accurate remediation steps.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, appreciate you guys taking some questions there. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Sean and Chinmay, for putting together this presentation and for the insights here. Really appreciate your time today.
That was great. Thank you for having us.
All right. Well, we've got one more piece of business before we wrap up, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of that $250 Amazon gift card today is Farhad Sunavala from California. So congratulations to Farhad. We'll be in touch to get you your card. Just one last quick reminder to everybody about the handout section. There are a couple of resources in there that you can grab. We've got a few seconds here left, so if you want to click on those to open them up in another tab before we wrap up, this is your chance. Okay, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Harness for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.